In Armed Forces Week, we recognise the extraordinary commitment made by our brave servicemen and women, past and present, to keep this country safe. And I pay tribute to all serving today and to their families and our veterans. Mr. Speaker, the last time I spoke in an Opposition Day debate on defence was in March, on the subject of the long-delayed Defence Investment Plan. Since then, we've still had no Defence Investment Plan. Instead, we've had chaos. The resignation of the Secretary of State for Defence, the resignation of the Minister for the Armed Forces, and yesterday, the resignation of the Prime Minister himself. These resignations are not unconnected. On the contrary, for a Prime Minister who thought that national security was his strong suit, those resignations from the MOD were fatal for his career, and they have a common thread, namely, Labour's massive strategic mistake of prioritising an ever bigger welfare state over properly funding defence, despite war in Europe and the Middle East. As the previous Defence Secretary said himself, he simply could not put his name to a defence investment plan with a financial settlement that, to quote, falls well short and would make the country less safe. I will do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm grateful to the case my honourable friend is making up. But does my honourable friend share the concern that I had last week in the statement from the Minister of State opposite and the Secretary of State, that they could not commit to delivering the capital ship programme that has already been laid out? And I'm hearing rumours, Mr. Speaker, rumours, that the new Type 83 destroyers were being mothballed in plans 6 months ago. Does that concern my honourable friend at a time when defence is so critical?
James Cartlidge.
My honourable friend served in the Navy, was a Defence Minister, speaks with expertise. It is an extremely serious and important point. This is why we want to see the Defence Investment Plan, Mr. Speaker. We've been waiting for months. We've been promised it repeatedly from the dispatch box. We need to see the details, whether it's the Navy, the Army or the Royal Air Force. And of course, the previous Secretary of State knew this was a problem. Let's just remind ourselves what else he said. He said that he was being, and I quote, forced to make decisions that would reduce the readiness of our forces and increase the risk to personnel on operations. That is a staggering indictment. The Prime Minister was seriously considering a financial settlement for defence that would, in the words of the man responsible for defence in this government until less than 2 weeks ago, make Britain less safe. But he wasn't alone in that warning. Last week, the Chief of the Defence Staff issued a stark message of his own when he said, and I quote, "We will have to dial back our activities and our exercise and operational activity if the level of resource funding that is available to us does not increase." Mr. Speaker, that is the stark reality. If the financial offer stays the same, at a time of war and the most profound threats to our nation since the Cold War, defence will have to be cut, our country made less safe. Well, they cut £2.6 billion last year from defence. They're cutting £3.5 billion this year. How much more to come when our country needs the complete opposite? I will tomorrow.
My honourable friend, does he agree with me that Ankara is going to be extremely interesting this year, particularly when characters like Sikorski, Foreign Minister Sikorski, are pointing out that Poland is going to be spending 4.8% on defence, whilst we spend 4.5 billion on cycle tracks. He's pointed out that that's indicative of the priorities of this government and fears, as an Anglophile, a committed Anglophile, that it's indicative of this country retreating into the shadows. It's difficult to avoid that conclusion, isn't it?
Well, my right honourable friend, who also served in the Navy and as a minister, speaks with great expertise, and he's absolutely right to remind us the problems of the Defence Investment Plan are about our international prestige, how our allies see us, and they are worried. Poland is a close ally of the United Kingdom. I'm proud of the strength of our relationship, and I think we should all listen to what our allies are saying about the need for more funding. But the question we have to ask ourselves is why? Why would the government have to cut defence? I'm going to come to that question when I've taken this intervention, then make more progress. I could wait on the gentleman.
I do thank the Right Honourable General for giving way. Of course, this isn't a debate about whether or not we increase defence spending. It's about how much we increase it by. He talks about our standing with our allies, which is incredibly important. What did our allies think when his government was cutting defence? What did they think? Can he tell us?
There we go. Well, I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman. It's a nice try. The question he needs to answer is, if things are so good, why did the Secretary of State resign and the Minister for the Armed Forces, Madam Deputy Speaker? And this question I was asking, I will give way in a minute to my honourable friend, especially as I'm coming to an area of policy that she knows only too well, because we ask ourselves, why would they have to cut defence? Because they won't cut welfare. So I give way to the former Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, can my right honourable friend clarify the financial offer that the Prime Minister made for the Defence Investment Plan, and that it was only 0.08% of GDP, which was £10 billion in real cash terms, not the £13 billion on offer. And it was that prompted the Defence Secretary to resign, because it was not enough to keep our nation safe.
Well, I'm very grateful for my right honourable friend. She's absolutely, literally on the money. That's exactly right. Just a derisory increase to 2.68%, when the 2.6 figure already includes things like the intelligence budget, which have been used to inflate it. But I was speaking about welfare, and Madam Deputy Speaker, I will do in a bit. I just want to make an important personal point, because I didn't have the privilege of serving in the armed forces. I did have the privilege of being Defence Procurement Minister, and I hope that what I did before entering Parliament helped a little in that role. I ran a small business. I employed people. And I will never forget the time I offered pay rises and extra hours to my staff, and they turned me down. Why? Because the cripplingly expensive tax credit system we inherited from Labour created a massive disincentive against work. The country was literally paying billions to put a ceiling on people's aspiration, when I was brought up to believe that we should smash the ceilings that hold people back from success, so that instead of trapping people in dependency, we set them free to make the most of their talents. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Will he accept that welfare is actually only part of the story of where we might need to find money from, because that would provide valuable revenue resource, but actually a lot of what we're talking about is an equipment programme that needs to be funded from capital. When I speak substantively later, I'll suggest where I might like to find it from, but I'd like to know which capital budgets the opposition would look at in order to increase capital spending.
Well, the honourable gentleman, I take him in the spirit he asked it, because he's being very open. He's asking the question, where are we going to get the money? We've been debating that. We think welfare is incredibly important. It's not just about the quantum, Madam Deputy Speaker. It would make us a more resilient country if we get people into work instead of on welfare. But he asked the question on capital. We have said, and people may disagree, but it's a clear commitment, we would take £11 billion in the National Wealth Fund that will currently be going to net zero, and we would ring-fence it for defence, because that is our priority given the world we are facing. I give way to my honourable friend.
The challenge we have at the minute is not only do we have a shadow opposition, we've got a shadow government as well. A whole set of ministers who we don't know they're going to be in place, and we've got someone who's about to become Prime Minister potentially, for whom we know absolutely almost nothing about their priorities, his priorities on defence, on the strategic challenges, on welfare. Does that concern him that we're going to get somebody new when we know very, very little about their position on these incredibly important issues?
Well, my honourable friend makes an excellent point, because, of course, what this all creates is massive uncertainty. And defence is a massive industry in this country. That uncertainty is damaging for our businesses, our defence businesses, and indeed dual-use companies right across the nation who employ thousands and thousands of people. So we do need far more certainty, whoever is going to be Prime Minister. But I was talking about welfare reform, and my right honourable friend for Chingford and Woodford Green reformed that system of tax credits with the introduction of universal credit. And before the pandemic, we saved billions from welfare, all in the face, as my colleagues will remember, of unending and total opposition to any reduction in welfare dependency from the Labour Party. But they can't go on like that, setting their face against welfare reform. It must be obvious that in the national interest we have to reform welfare. Tony Blair, their former Prime Minister, knows we need to cut welfare to fund defence. Lord Robertson, the former Defence Secretary, knows it too, saying you can't keep Britain safe with an ever-expanding welfare budget. That's why last week the Leader of the Opposition wrote to the Prime Minister offering our support in the national interest to cut welfare and fund defence. Last week I repeated that offer to the Secretary of State in his statement last Monday. He didn't answer. So I wrote to him last week with the same offer, and I hope he will accept. And I hope he will now confirm that he wants to put politics to one side and work with us to make those difficult decisions so that the Defence Investment Plan can finally be funded and published. So on the... I will give way to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Isn't the truth here, though, that we had a government that said that it was prepared to meet the threats that we face as a country, and yet the government is simply dithering and delaying, and with all the infighting that's going on their benches now, what hope is there for our country at a time when we need sustainability, we need certainty, not chaos?
Well, an excellent question from my honourable friend. Dither and delay have been the theme all the way. We've been waiting for months. I've stood up at every single oral questions and asked them, when are they going to publish a defence investment plan? Hundreds of times it feels they've replied, we're working flat out, and we still haven't got it. So can I ask the Minister to tell us if the DIP will definitely be published before the NATO summit in Ankara? In particular, can he tell us who is deciding the timetable for publication of the Defence Investment Plan? Is it the acting Prime Minister or the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield? Now, it was reported today by the political editor of the Times, Steve Swinford, that there is now an argument between the two as to when to publish the Defence Investment Plan. They're working flat out, having this discussion. Mr. Swinford said on X, the first conflict of the transition period. Sir Keir Starmer is planning to push ahead with announcing the Defence Investment Plan despite Andy Burnham wanting it delayed until he is in office. So it is a simple question, Madam Deputy Speaker. Who is in charge of defence in the United Kingdom at a time of war on two fronts? Is it the Prime Minister or the Right Honourable Member for Makerfield? I give way to my honourable.
I thank my honourable friend, and he's right honourable friend, and he's making an excellent point. Isn't the real risk here that the Defence Investment Plan, which that government promised in the first place, is actually now going to be treated like a political football? And the end result of that will be defence supply chains in this country, international adversaries, but also international allies will actually see that we're not worth doing business with.
Well, loath as I am to talk about political footballs when tonight I think there may be our football team in action. Nevertheless, it's pretty obvious. Whether it's football, rugby or a tug of war, we already have a massive argument in the heart of government and the shadow government over who is in charge. And at a time when we face the threats we do, that is an extraordinary position for Labour to have us in. I'll give away first of all to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful. He's right to hold the government to account. The plan is massively delayed. Is he aware, surely, that all of us here, including my party, who spent time in government in the last few years, that ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, we have been complacent as a country about the scale of threat that we face? And isn't it something, therefore, that all parties need to recognise? We've got our smallest army since the Napoleonic times. We have 8,000 drones in stock. Ukraine are using 8,000 drones a day. Isn't it a time that we work together across party to make sure we defend our country the way we will need to in the years to come?
Well, I am very grateful to the honourable gentleman because, to be fair, I have always said I think we do need to work in national interest, and I have said repeatedly spending fell on defence since the fall of the Berlin Wall under successive governments. That must be blindingly obvious. And there are decisions Labour made, there are the decisions we made, there are decisions the Lib Dems made us make in the coalition, for example, about the nuclear submarines. Everyone has got some culpability in relation to this record. The key issue, I'm just responding to this intervention, if honourable members will allow me. The key issue is what we do now to fund defence. I'm going to take one more intervention, then I'm going to make some progress to the honourable gentleman from Strangford.
Can I commend the Shadow Minister and the Conservative Party for what they're bringing forward today? Warfare is changing, and the Shadow Minister knows that. In the paper today, they're talking about a warfare that could be done by AI, which would include maybe some 10,000 drones. Just as an example of how warfare is changing, the Veterans Minister resigned, and he made that statement in his personal statement just last week in Parliament. Does the Shadow Minister agree, when it comes to deciding the defence strategy going forward, we must look at the new technology, we must look at how wars are going to be fought, because they will be different, but we need to be on the winning side? It's not time we did that.
Well, my honourable friend is always at the cutting edge with his interventions, and he was spot on there. It is not just about the funding, Madam Deputy Speaker. With warfare changing so fast, as he says, we need to prioritise capability. Put simply, the Defence Investment Plan must be genuinely transformative. So it is incredibly worrying that once he finally got to see the Defence Investment Plan, the previous Minister for the Armed Forces resigned not long afterwards, stating that the plan was, and I quote, not built for the threats we face. Madam Deputy Speaker, this country led the way in supplying Ukraine with cutting-edge drone tech produced by UK SMEs. I cannot emphasise that point enough. We were a leader. When you consider the progress we were making supplying drones that were so effective on the battlefront in the spring of 2024 and bringing forward extraordinary counter-drone capability like Dragonfire, it was another strategic blunder from Labour to put procurement on hold whilst we waited for the Strategic Defence Review and now still waiting for the Defence Investment Plan. With war changing so fast, we cannot afford to waste 2 years paralysing procurement. I'm going to take two interventions, my honourable friend and then the honourable gentleman. Give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. When he talks about the future of warfare, this was very much raised when we attended Spacecom earlier this year, where the delay in the dip is having an impact on our ability to keep up with advancing space technology. Does my right honourable friend agree that this is an important point and we should set a space strategy as the previous government did in 2022?
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. That's exactly why we have announced the policy of a sovereign defence fund. £2 billion extra per year for drones, AI and tech, alongside £11 billion, as I said earlier, from the National Wealth Fund, repurposed from net zero to defence to fund our sovereign industrial base so that they can scale up and meet the level of output we will require to be war ready. I give way to the gallant and honourable gentleman.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way. He's talking about air defence. I'm glad he raised that. Does he regret the cuts that were made to air defence under the last government when funding for defence reduced so dramatically? And does he welcome the investment that this government is making in air defence, learning the lessons that we're now seeing from Ukraine?
I don't know what he is talking about. What investment in air defence? We procured rapid sentry, Madam Deputy. What do we think is being used on our bases in the Middle East right now to defeat drones? Stuff we procured in government. Who procured Dragonfire laser? I did, Madam Deputy. It is going to be the most cutting-edge air defence. I procured the radio frequency-directed energy weapon, which could also be incredibly cutting-edge, literally frying entire swarms of drones. This is where we need to be, at the cutting edge. We invested in it. They specialise in dither and delay. Now, Madam Speaker, as important as drones and tech is, our most important capability remains the people who serve. So whilst it is critical that the government rapidly embraces the uncrewed revolution right across our armed forces, we must also back our people. That's why in government we increased pay for junior ranks in 2023 by 9.7%, and I took the decision to buy back the defence estate from Annington Homes when I was Minister. So on housing, and I want to ask a very important question that they didn't answer yesterday. Until very recently, ministers have consistently repeated a pledge to invest £9 billion in military accommodation over the next 10 years. With rumours that this funding will be cut, as reported in the press, yesterday my right honourable friend, the Shadow Armed Forces Minister, asked if this commitment stood. Is it the case, yes or no? Will the Minister say in her speech? Of course, in Armed Forces Week, Madam Deputy Speaker, I must pay tribute to those who serve in our reserves. Back in 2023, we also increased the bounty for reserves personnel by 5.8%, and I believe with the threats we face, we must continue to strengthen our reserves. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, we agree wholeheartedly with what the previous Armed Forces Minister said about the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill. In his resignation speech, and I quote, "The IRA failed to achieve its political ends through the use of terrorist tactics, and we must be exceptionally careful that we do not help them achieve those ends through other means." So can the Minister say whether the Secretary of State for Defence, a veteran of Operation Banner himself, agrees that whoever is the next Prime Minister, a top priority must be to scrap the Troubles Bill and back our veterans? So, Madam Speaker, to conclude, assuming the right honourable member of Makerfield becomes Prime Minister in the coming weeks, he will have many items in his in tray. But the first duty of any government is defence of the realm. So when Labour's own Secretary of State for Defence until days ago resigned, saying Labour's defence investment plan would make the country less safe, it must be obvious that this is the top item for the new Prime Minister's attention. If the new Prime Minister is to succeed, the quantum of cash on the table will need to be far more substantial given the threats we face, and that means finding the money without increasing our national debt or taxes. Instead, to make our country stronger and more resilient, we are offering to work in the national interest to cut welfare and fund defence. In Armed Forces Week, we all agree that the men and women who serve our country are second to none. So I ask ministers again, are they prepared to work together to find the cash to fund defence so that we can give our brave personnel the tools to do the job and keep this country safe?
Well done. Very